Hello and welcome to Qualitative 2013 in Valencia. I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Thompson. First of all, Michael, thanks for joining me. Do you want to give a little bit of an introduction to yourself first of all?
Sure, thanks very much. Well, I'm Michael Thompson. I'm Research Director at Opinion Leader in the UK, and I was speaking today about a counter-terrorism project that we carried out with Westminster City Council and relating that back to some back-to-basics principles of qualitative research.
Yeah, I was just watching it and I found it really, really fascinating. I'm interested if we can kind of delve into this back to basics kind of thing that you had going on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the session was all about, started off with Ray Pointer talking about clients becoming more in control of the way they do qualitative research and using more DIY methods. And I think our stand was that there are certain things that clients without training can't do by themselves, and difficult projects like the counter-terrorism one we carried out for Westminster would be an example of that. So we were trying to emphasise 4 back-to-basics principles, which were grounding time, discourse and context. So grounding, making sure the research is grounded in the evidence; discourse, making sure you're alert to the different narratives and the language that people use to talk about the subject, whether it's something like this which is in the public sector or a branding issue; time, spending plenty of time with participants, and context, trying to get into the social context in which they live or work to understand what influences and motivates their behaviour. And I think in line with some of the other presentations, it's really trying to establish some of those back to basics principles to help people to carry out qualitative research effectively who might not have had the kind of training I have as a practitioner in the industry, so that they can go out and do effective research, even if it's not carried out directly through agencies, as we're seeing happen increasingly now.
You move on to doing the interviews and then communities-based methodology. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you chose that approach?
Yes, yeah. Well, the project, as I say, was about counter-terrorism, carried out with Westminster City Council and 2 other London boroughs. And for the PREVENT strategy, which is the government's counter-terrorism strategy, and a lot of the research that's been carried out around PREVENT has limited itself to community groups. So you just go and speak to the usual suspects, people in the community who can inform you supposedly about what's going on amongst the people that they represent. And there are obvious problems with that in that they might not be that representative. They might represent fairly narrow interests. And really what you want to do is get out and speak to some of the individuals who might be at risk of being influenced by radical messages. So that's what we tried to do. Triangulating the data between 3 sources, so young men who are at risk of being influenced by terrorist narratives or extremist narratives, community groups who perhaps got a broad, in some senses, got a broader view of the communities that they work in, and then institutions as well, so like the police or the Home Office, institutions involved in the delivery of PREVENT who have a strategic view and a view of the intelligence that just wouldn't be apparent to me as a researcher or to the other 2 groups that we spoke to. And a lot of the findings, as I was saying in the presentation, were generated through triangulation of those 3 data points. So it's all about robustness and making sure that you've covered all the bases in terms of who you're speaking to and the data you're collecting.
Okay, and I just had a little interview with a guy called Joseph, who's the only Kenyan representative here at the event, and he said that he was most looking forward to your presentation. He found it really interesting, and he was wondering whether it would kind of transfer to a kind of different country, to a less developed country, your approach. Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm sure it would. I mean, I don't know what the practicalities are like in terms of doing this kind of thing in Kenya, because of course in the UK, being such a researched country, we've got an infrastructure in place that allows us to do this. So we had locally based recruiters working in the communities that we were researching, which gave that local point of contact, enabling the interviewees to participate, because they could go and ask the recruiter questions. They were confident and comfortable with the setup, even if they hadn't taken part in research before. Quite how you go about it, but I mean, it's an interesting proposition because of what's going on in Kenya and other African countries now in terms of the terrorist threat. I mean, I've done a bit of work in Ghana and Nigeria talking to people who were formerly in British prisons, but again, that's all been carried out in tandem with immigration offices, so it makes our job easier because we've got a route into speaking to these people. And of course, the sensitivities are such that if you're doing a job like this as a researcher, you may well have the government authorities on your back and wanting to know if anything untoward has been said that they need to act on, and establishing proper protocols for that would be very important. And so if you were to do this in Kenya, you'd have to consider that as well.
Of course. Michael, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks very much.